The vanilla buttercream cake stood proudly on the kitchen counter, decorated with "Congratulations, graduate" in elegant blue script. I'd saved for months to afford it a small indulgence to celebrate becoming the first person in my family to earn a college degree. My emerald green velvet dress, bought specifically for this day, hugged my curves perfectly. For the first time in years, I felt beautiful and accomplished. That's when 8-year-old Liam, my sister's angel, walked into the kitchen with a malicious grin that didn't belong on a child's face. "And he's fat," he announced loudly, his voice cutting through the happy chatter of our family gathering. "She doesn't need more cake." Before I could respond, before anyone could move, he shoved the entire cake off the counter. It hit the tile floor with a sickening splat, blue frosting spraying across my dress, the walls, everything. The room went silent. Then Liam pointed at the destroyed cake and said words that would haunt me forever. "Now you can eat it off the ground like you deserve, fatty." My sister Sarah rushed in, took one look at the situation, and laughed. That sound that cruel, dismissive laughter hurt almost as much as Liam's words. "Oh, Liam, you're so mischievous," she said, ruffling his hair like he'd done something adorable rather than something devastating. "Mischievous?" I whispered, frosting dripping down my beautiful dress, the dress I'd saved for 6 months to buy. "He just destroyed my graduation cake and told me to eat off the floor." Sarah waved a dismissive hand, not even looking at me as she checked Liam for any frosting that might have gotten on his clothes. "He's just a boy being a boy. Don't be so dramatic, Chloe." But I wasn't being dramatic. I was remembering for years of sacrifices, the missed meals to pay tuition, the night studying until dawn while working 2 jobs, the shame of being the poor scholarship student among classmates with trust funds. This cake represented all I'd overcome, all I'd achieved despite the odds. Then I noticed my mother filming everything with her phone. "This will be hilarious for my TikTok," she chirped, zooming in on my tear-streaked face, then panning to the destroyed cake on the floor. Something inside me snapped. The years of being the family punching back, the sensitive fat sister, the too emotional daughter, the aunt who couldn't take a joke, all came crashing down in that moment. I looked at Liam, who was now smirking at me, waiting for my reaction. I looked at my sister, who thought her son's cruelty was amusing. I looked at my mother, who found my humiliation entertaining. Slowly, deliberately, I reached down and picked up a large chunk of cake from the floor. Vanilla and buttercream smeared across my fingers, the same fingers that had typed countless papers, worked endless shifts, written exams that earned me honors. "See," Sarah said triumphantly, "she's going to eat it." I told you she was desperate for attention, but I didn't bring the cake to my mouth. Instead, I walked over to Liam and smashed it directly into his face. The room went dead silent, so quiet I could hear the frosting dripping from the ceiling. "Now I know how it feels," I said calmly as he sputtered and cried, blue buttercream covering his eyes, his nose, his smug little mouth. Sarah screamed, a shrill sound that shattered the silence. "How dare you? He's just a child." "So was I when you started calling me fat," I replied, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes. "So was I when you hid my food and told me I needed to save room for my future. So was I when you taught him that hurting me was funny." My mother stopped filming, her mouth hanging open in shock. I turned to Liam, who was now wailing, the cake slowly sliding down his face. "I'm sorry I did that to you," I said, my voice softening but still firm. "But what you did to me was cruel and wrong. We don't treat people like that no matter how old we are, no matter what they look like." Then I faced my sister, who was frantically trying to wipe cake off Liam's face. "And you've been teaching him to bully me since he could talk. You think it's funny when he hurts me. You laugh when he says cruel things, but it ends today. It ends right now." Sarah's face turned purple with rage. "Get out of my house. You've ruined everything." I looked at the destroyed cake on the floor, at my ruined dress, at my family's horrified faces. And I realized something profound, something that should have been obvious years ago. I hadn't ruined anything. I just stopped pretending their cruelty was acceptable. I just stopped being their victim. "Gladly," I said, grabbing my purse and walking toward the door. But before I left, I turned back one last time. By the way, I said, my voice clear and strong. I graduated summa cum laude. I had the highest GPA in my department. I've already been offered 3 jobs, but none of that matters to you, does it? Because all you see when you look at me is someone you can hurt. Then I walked out, leaving them standing in a wreckage of their own cruelty. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood on my sister's porch, breathing in the clean evening air. For the first time in my life, I felt free. I drove home in a daze, the events of the evening playing over and over in my mind. When I got to my small apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't call friends to complain. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I started writing. I wrote about what it was like growing up as the fat sister in a family that valued appearances above everything. I wrote about the constant criticism, the backhanded compliments, the way they'd praise my achievements while subtly undermining them. I wrote about working 3 jobs to put myself through college while my sister got a new car from our parents. I wrote about the loneliness of being the black sheep, the scapegoat, the one who was always too sensitive, too emotional, too much. I wrote until my hand ached and the sun came up. And when I was done, I had something I'd never had before, clarity. The next morning, I did something even more terrifying than confronting my family. I published what I'd written. I didn't put it on some anonymous blog or a private journal. I posted it on LinkedIn, of all places, with my name and photo and a clear, professional headline, what I learned about workplace bullying from growing up with family bullies. I talked about how the patterns started young, how people learn to hurt others from those who should teach them to care, how the dynamics we grow up with shape how we navigate professional spaces. I didn't name my family, but I didn't have to. The story was specific enough that anyone who knew us would recognize it, but universal enough that strangers connected with it too. Then I went about my day. I cleaned my apartment. I applied for jobs. I went for a walk. I tried not to think about what I'd posted. The response started slowly at first. A few likes from college friends, a comment from a professor. Then something strange happened. The post started getting shared. And shared and shared. By midday, my phone was blowing up with notifications. People I hadn't spoken to in years were messaging me. Former classmates, old teachers, even some relatives I actually liked. They were offering support, sharing their own stories, thanking me for my courage. But the real surprise came when I checked my email. There were messages from recruiters at companies I'd only dreamed of working for. There were invitations to speak at conferences about bullying and resilience. There was even an email from a literary agent asking if I'd considered writing a book. Meanwhile, my family was losing their minds. My phone started ringing with calls from my mother, my sister, my aunts. They were furious, embarrassed, horrified that I'd air our dirty laundry in public. My mother left a screaming voicemail about how I'd humiliated the family. My sister texted that I was dead to her. My aunt sent a long email about family loyalty. I didn't respond to any of them. For the first time in my life, I held my ground. I'd spent 28 years trying to earn their love, their approval, their basic human decency. I was done. A week later, I accepted a job offer from one of the companies that had reached out a position with a salary twice what I'd even expecting, doing work I was genuinely passionate about. On my first day, my new boss pulled me aside. I read your article, she said. The world needs more people who won't tolerate bullying in any form. I'm glad you're here. It was the first time my experiences with my family hadn't been treated as a shameful secret. It was the first time my resilience was valued rather than dismissed as oversensitivity. That evening, I celebrated alone in my apartment with a small, perfect cupcake from my favorite bakery. I ate it slowly, savoring every bite, not worrying about what anyone thought of my body or my choices. As I finished the last crumb, my phone buzzed. It was my father, the only member of my family who hadn't joined in the attacks, but who had never stopped them either. I read your article, his text said, I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I wrote back, yes, you should have. But I protect myself now. I didn't hear from him again, but that was okay. Some apologies come too late to fix anything, but they can still provide closure. Months passed. I excelled at my new job. I made friends who valued me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. I even started dating someone who thought I was beautiful and never once commented on what I ate or what I weighed. One day, I got an email from my nephew's school. Liam was being bullied. The other kids had started calling him Cake Face after someone's parent had read my article and recognized the story. They were pushing him around, telling him to eat off the floor, all the things he'd done to me. My sister was begging me to retract the article, to say it was all a misunderstanding, to fix what I'd broken. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about 8-year-old me crying in my room after my sister told me I was too fat to wear pretty clothes. I thought about teenage me skipping meals because my mother said I needed to watch my figure. I thought about college me working late shifts and waking up early to study, determined to make something of myself despite my family's constant undermining. And I thought about Liam learning the same cruel lessons my sister had learned from our parents, continuing the cycle of hurt. Then I wrote back to the school. I offered to come speak to Liam's class about bullying. I offered to share my story not as a victim, but as someone who learned that hurt people and that the cycle can be broken. I didn't retract the article. I didn't say it was a misunderstanding. But I offered to help my nephew learn what I had to learn the hard way. That our words have power, that our actions have consequences, and that no one, no matter what they look like or who they are, deserves to be treated like they re less than human. The school took me up on my offer. When I stood in front of Liam's 3rd grade class, I saw him sitting in the back row, looking small and scared and nothing like the smug child who had destroyed my cake. I told them a story about a girl who was bullied by her family, but I changed the names and some details. I talked about how hurtful words can stick with you for years. I talked about how being cruel doesn't make you strong, it makes you weak. I talked about how everyone deserves respect. Afterward, Liam waited until all the other kids had left before approaching me. "I'm sorry, Aunt Chloe," he whispered, his eyes filled with genuine tears. "I didn't know it hurt that much." "I know you didn't," I said, kneeling down to his level, "but now you do. And now you can choose to be different." He hugged me then, a real hug, not the perfunctory ones he'd given me before under his mother's watchful eye. It wasn't a perfect happy ending. My relationship with my family is still complicated. Some of them still don't speak to me. Others have reached out tentatively, wanting to rebuild, but not quite knowing how. But I've built a new family of friends, of colleagues, of people who see my worth and celebrate it rather than tearing it down. Last week, I baked a cake from scratch. I decorated it with beautiful buttercream flowers and the words "I'm enough" in elegant script. I shared it with my new friends at a dinner party, and when they complimented my baking, I simply said thank you without any self-deprecating comments about calories or my weight. As I served the last slice, I thought about that day in my sister's kitchen. I thought about the cake on the floor, the cruel words, the humiliation. And I realized that sometimes the worst moments of our lives become the catalysts for our greatest growth. Sometimes being told to eat off the floor is what finally teaches you that you deserve to sit at the table. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is revenge at all it's building a life so beautiful that the cruelty of others becomes nothing more than background noise.